let's not talk negatively about legal migration, but we do have to find a way that makes that points-based system work. We are fully in control of our borders post-Brexit. We've got this points-based system in place. I think the vast majority of the public do actually support. What we've now got to do as the absolute priority is stop the illegal flow of migrants. We've passed 3 bits of legislation in the last parliament to try and do that. Every time the lawyers find the loopholes and keep it in the courts, the Labour Party voted against. And actually, I think I'm right in saying the Liberal Democrats voted against all of it. They voted against. And so
but the reason you had to pass 3 was because every single time you passed one, it didn't work.
Well, let's talk about migration now. It's an issue that the Conservatives and Reform UK would both like to see this election fought on. Reform held their campaign launch in Dover last week, with Nigel Farage and Richard Tice appearing against a backdrop festooned with union flags and slogans promising to save Britain. Labour have been talking about immigration as well. The Labour leader Keir Starmer told The Sun on Sunday, "Mark my words, a future Labour government will bring down net migration." But appearing on Times Radio this morning, Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper refused to set a target number. Michael, why won't you put a figure on it?
Well, for a number of reasons. I suppose partly the Conservatives have put numbers on it for years and never met a single one of them. So it's, we could name a number and it might not actually have much impact on delivering it. So we're not going to do that. But secondly, there also will be fluctuations from year to year. I mean, you think about the years of COVID, that there was naturally quite a significant decline in numbers in those years. And then with the Ukraine war, we obviously had schemes to bring Ukrainian refugees to Britain, and that was a welcome thing that was shared by all parties. So we accept that the numbers were going to go up. So I don't think it's about having a fixed number that we have to relentlessly try and work towards, but it's about being sensible. I mean, I think most people accept there have to be some sensible limits on migration. And in particular, what we've been saying today is that we shouldn't be using migration as the means to fill gaps in our employment market, and that's a problem if actually what we're doing is using migration because we've got skills gaps or we've got gaps in particular parts of the country. We should be looking at how do we first of all introduce skills training and opportunities for people who are here at the moment to fill those jobs. And then in other sectors, I mean, social care is a particular one which is in a real crisis at the moment. But the long-term need there is to fix the working conditions in the care sector, not just to rely on bringing people from abroad to fill those vacancies. So look, I'm somebody who thinks immigration is a great thing. I think people have contributed hugely to our society, and we should welcome it. But there does need to be some sensible limits. And what we've said today is that part of how we'll do that is by introducing some new measures around skills and apprenticeships, to try and increase the ability of people in this country to fill those employment gaps rather than relying on migration.
John, do the Lib Dems want to bring down net migration?
I think we want to be decent to people. And also, frankly, anything that... When Nigel Farage and co... And he's not... His position in this election is rather weird because it seems as if he would like to be the next leader of the Conservative Party after they lose this election, and so he's actually not engaging with reform in a strange way. But essentially, I think we should be decent with people. Obviously, I'm a Liberal Democrat, and therefore I am passionate about the European Union. I think that Brexit was a terrible mistake, and that has had a whole series of consequences. So one of the things is that actually it's made our relationships, for example, with the government of France much more difficult, because we don't meet them over a table in Brussels. And because of that, there is a real clunkiness about how we ask our French colleagues, can you please help us stop the boats? None of this is helped by, for example, Liz Truss, when she was asked, what do you think to President Macron? Well, the jury's still out. I mean, like, if there are people like Vladimir Putin and Chairman Xi in Beijing, those are our true enemies. And
I do get that, but that's slightly off topic, John, with respect from the point of migration. I mean, we've currently got 685,000 is the net migration number. Is that too high?
I'm uncomfortable with being overly precise about numbers, but actually, since we've left the European Union, we've actually got less control over our borders than before. So it is not irrelevant to say that one of the many bad consequences of Brexit is we have less control over those numbers than we did before. But I am, and our party believes in controlled immigration, because there are obviously anxieties that good people have about uncontrolled immigration. Now, of course, this is stoked by Farage and co, but we do need to have a better policy. I do believe the Conservative policy on Rwanda, on sending people to Rwanda, is a very bad one indeed, and it's expensive. It's cost something like nigh on £500 million, and there have been more Conservative Home Secretaries that have gone to Rwanda than asylum seekers. I believe that only one person has, and he was paid a handsome amount of dosh to do so. There is a serious problem with Rwanda because it's a bit of a fascist state. If you oppose the government there, you can die. And I can go into chapter and verse if Greg Smith disagrees with me on that. So I think what we should do is have a civilized policy about immigration, and we need to talk in a much more constructive way with our French colleagues. What I would propose is that we put in CCTV on poles on the beach in France, and we connect it with a grid. The Ukrainian army does this with the Russian front, so they can see exactly what's happening. And then that is relayed to French police stations. We may well have to pay for this. That's fine. It'll still be cheaper than Rwanda. But that's how we get the boat. It's not good for people from terrible places to risk their lives to go on small boats. I'm against it. But we need to handle the whole thing in a more civilized and more temperate way than we're doing so currently.
Greg, let me bring you in. Greg Smith, Conservative candidate. Net migration has tripled under the Conservatives. Why should voters believe it when you say you're going to bring it down?
Well, there's clearly a lot of people around the world that want to make a better life for themselves here in the United Kingdom. And actually, we've got near record lows on unemployment and still vacancies in the economy. And some of those jobs, are very attractive to people that want to come and make a life for themselves here in the United Kingdom. So that has gone up. I think what we've got to do in British politics is we do have to have a sensible debate that splits out the illegal flow of people arriving on the shores of the United Kingdom in a straightforwardly illegal manner, often at the hands of the evil criminal gangs that traffic them across the English Channel, risking their lives in the small boats. And I do support the Rwanda policy, but the Rwanda policy is one piece of a 2,500 piece jigsaw puzzle when it comes to stopping the boats and cracking down on the criminal gangs that operate in the channel. And then we've got to have a sensible debate about the legal flow of migration. This government has put in place the points-based system. Clearly, people are reaching the points required in order to come into the UK, and the figures bear that out. And many of those people, they come to do essential jobs in the UK, from seasonal agricultural workers to great physicists and doctors and people that save lives. So let's not talk negatively about legal migration, but we do have to find a way that makes that points-based system work. We are fully in control of our borders post-Brexit. We've got this points-based system in place. I think the vast majority of the public do actually support. What we've now got to do as the absolute priority is stop the illegal flow of migrants. We've passed 3 bits of legislation in the last Parliament to try and do that. Every time the lawyers find the loopholes and keep it in the courts, the Labour Party voted against. And actually, I think I'm right in saying the Liberal Democrats voted against all of it. They voted against. And so
but the reason you had to pass 3 was because every single time you passed one, it didn't work. And the third one, the Rwanda bill, is absolutely not going to work, which is presumably why we've had a general election before it was proven that no planes would get off and that this wasn't going to work. The thing with this, and we need to get onto a sensible conversation that moves us away from Farage being part of the conversation at all, because his politics is not reflected by the country. Onto a sensible conversation and get off the gimmicks as well, and actually have real plans to deal with illegal migration. and then a credible plan for dealing with net migration more generally.
Let me bring in Rachel Cunliffe on this, Associate Political Editor at the New Statesman. I mean, Michael says that Farage's position, Reform's position, isn't reflected among the country. If you look at the polling, I mean, there is concern about the level of migration. What's your read on this?
There is and there isn't. It's a really interesting one. And one of the things that has come out of this discussion with all three candidates is the distinction between legal and illegal migration. So that figure, 685,000 people coming to the UK. That's legal migration. That's people who are granted visas. Channel crossings, 30,000 last year. Still high, but that's 1/20th of that figure. We're clearly talking about very different, distinct things. If you look at the polls, there is anxiety among the public about hundreds of thousands of people coming here legally. That concern is there. If you ask people, should migration be lower, generally they say yes. But if you break it down and say, okay, of that group, do you want fewer overseas doctors and nurses? No. Do you want fewer overseas care workers? No. Do you want fewer international students if they are paying higher fees that subsidise domestic students? Generally, the public pretty relaxed about international students. What about seasonal workers like fruit pickers? Again, generally public pretty much on board with that, especially when you look at how much they're paid and the fact that they are paid rates that British workers just simply wouldn't accept. Interestingly, Minette Batters, who is the president of the National Farmers Union, this week has sort of been asked that question: should you just pay workers more if you and not import foreign labour? And she's kind of gone, our food production in this country would collapse if you did that. Similarly, we've brilliant scientists, technologic people want to start tech companies, physicists, all of that. British public pretty relaxed about that. So if you break down the type of people who are coming here, it's very difficult to find a cohort of legal migrants that there is consensus opinion probably shouldn't have come here. And that's why the Conservatives, and I think Labour too, saying they're going to bring down net migration, have really created a challenge for themselves, because everyone agrees it should fall, but nobody agrees how that should happen. And the confusion over the debate is what is preventing, I think, coherent policy from a number of the parties on this.
It's a fair point you raise. Had a message here saying, my friends are farmers that need hundreds of hop pickers each year. I don't see many young Brits lining up to do it. If they pay more than Waitrose, then your beer will certainly cost more, or they couldn't sell the crops. Politically, Rachel, though, it is interesting how Labour have decided they are going to talk about immigration. I mean, we remember in 2015, Ed Miliband had those mugs with controls on immigration on, and that got a lot of criticism from the left at the time. Clearly, Keir Starmer has decided the time is right to address this issue again.
I think that is possibly creating additional problems for Keir Starmer in a future government.
Really?
I think I can see why he's doing it, and it is the same rationale that, as we were talking about earlier, led to him accepting Natalie Elphicke, defecting from the Conservatives. He really doesn't want the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak to be able to suggest that Labour are weak on borders, weak on immigration and weak on security. But the problem with making those pledges is that voters then hold you to them. And I think he is creating further headaches for himself.